quickly why we are having this event now. This week, the International Criminal Court state parties to the Rome Statute is having its General Assembly. Concretely, for those who are not necessarily familiar with the international justice system, these are the representative of all the governments member of the ICC who are meeting every day. We usually take the opportunity of this assembly to organize a side event. This year, due to the COVID pandemic, as you can imagine, we were not in a position to hold this face-to-face event, and this is why we are having this live event, which is finally not such a bad thing, since it will probably allow more people to join and then hopefully expand participation to this event. We are also having this meeting conversation in a very specific context. First, the International Criminal Court Office of the Prosecutor announced last week that it was concluding a preliminary investigation into crimes against humanity and war crimes allegedly committed by Boko Haram and Nigerian security forces. So this decision will finally pave probably the way for a full-blown investigation to begin. And also a specific context, because almost at the same time last week, again, gunmen abducted over 500 students from a school in the town of Konkara in Katsina State, northwest Nigeria. And according to Nigerian authorities, we still have more than 300 students that are missing, and Boko Haram issued a video claiming responsibility for the abduction. So this conversation about justice accountability in Nigeria for these horrific crimes that have been committed this last decade is not only relevant, but also timely. So now it is my pleasure to introduce the panelists, all of them having been engaged in a way or another on this issue of justice and accountability for crimes committed in Nigeria. We will start first with Netsanet Belay, Research and Advocacy Director at Amnesty International, who will give an overview of the situation of the Northeast Nigeria, present the work Amnesty has been doing for years with its partners on this issue, and discuss what should be done now. Then we will have the extreme pleasure to have and to hear the testimony of Amsatou Alamin, well-known activist from Maiduguri, Northeast Nigeria. Amsatou has been doing an incredible work in mobilizing and connecting women affected by the conflict and in this fight for justice and accountability in Nigeria. We also have the huge privilege to welcome with us Agnes Kalama, the UN Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial, summary and arbitrary executions, who has in her capacity investigated this very specific issue and will give us a UN perspective. Rod Rastan, legal advisor at the Office of the Prosecutor at the ICC, has kindly accepted to join this conversation. Thank you. And he will give us some insight on this recent decision that I just mentioned. And we will conclude with an intervention from Obianuju Catherine Ude, better known as DJ Switch, who is also a very strong activist and one of the leaders of the NSAS movement against police violence in Nigeria, and that you all have probably heard about. This will allow us to make the link with impunity for security forces beyond the context of the Northeast conflict. Last point, we will have a Q&A session after the presentation, so please don't hesitate to share your questions in the chat, and we will try to answer them in the second part of this discussion. Again, welcome everyone to this event, and now I hand over to Netsanet. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining us. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening everyone. As indeed Samira mentioned, we're gathered here today after a major milestone was achieved in the struggle for justice and accountability in Nigeria. Indeed, last week, the prosecutor has finally announced the conclusion of preliminary examination, and that the office is preparing to request authorization from judges to open full investigation. And indeed, this is a major milestone, and it came after a decade-long delay and inaction. But at the same time, we do believe this is far from enough. We argue that The prosecutor must urgently seek permission from the judges to open an investigation, and that the investigation must start as soon as possible. We also believe there is much that can be done and should be done in parallel on evidence preservation, on protection of witnesses, and on outreach to victims in Nigeria. Why are we saying this? Let me raise 3 points in support of this. The first and most important reason is the fact that these crimes continue to be committed and with no end in sight. As Samira mentioned in her introduction, Boko Haram has killed thousands of civilians, abducted women, girls, and boys. Its members continue to loot villages, murder people who try to escape. Just last week, we've heard of yet another abduction of 500 students from a secondary school in Kankra. Many abducted in the past have been forcefully recruited as child soldiers or forced into marriage and sexual slavery. At the same time, the Nigerian security forces have committed and continue to commit serious atrocities. They have arbitrarily arrested, detained, and tortured people fleeing Boko Haram's attacks. And this is not an isolated incident. It's happening in a mass scale. People are fleeing, are screened when coming for safety, and almost all men are arbitrarily sent to military detention sites without being accused or charged of any crime. Thousands are held for months or years in human conditions, where many died of thirst, hunger, or disease. Amnesty International estimates that at least 10,000 people may have died in detention already. Many women and girls in IDP camps have also faced rape and sexual violence, and Amsatu will talk more about this in her turn. And what makes it most tragic in this case is that it's the same family that is a victim of both Boko Haram and Nigerian military forces. And we've documented countless testimonies of victims, including in our latest reports published this year that looks into the situation of children and older people. So this will continue. The argument is that this will continue unless this cycle of impunity is broken, unless each and every official, each and every commander, each and every soldier sees that their day in court is numbered. The second and equally important reason is the fact that there is no justice so far and no promising prospect that the Nigerian government will ever investigate and prosecute these crimes. The prosecutor told us last Friday that the delay in concluding the preliminary examination was in part due to the priority given by her office to support Nigerian authorities in investigating and prosecuting these crimes domestically. This statement comes despite the fact that Nigerian authorities kept demonstrating year after year that they were willingly unable to do so. The fact is this, colleagues, since 2009, over 20 different forms of inquiries, commissions, committees, panels have been set up. All of this to look into crimes committed by Nigerian security forces, CJTF, and Boko Haram. I personally engaged in the 2 recent ones, the Special Board of Inquiry set up by the Chief of Army Staff in March 2017, and the so-called Presidential Investigation Panel established in August 2017. And what a waste of time it has been for victims who have high hopes of these proceedings. Despite much posturing, these inquiries were never intended, designed, or conducted with a view to result in criminal prosecutions, and the reports were never made public. And the same can be said with respect to crimes committed by Boko Haram. Despite the facade, the reality remains that many victims of Boko Haram have not seen any meaningful justice. Authorities claim that hundreds of Boko Haram suspects were prosecuted and judged in mass trials held in 2017 and 2018. But there is overwhelming evidence, colleagues, that these were grossly unfair sham proceedings. They're organized mainly to establish legal cover for thousands of people who have already spent years in unlawful military detention. And none of these so-called mass trials targeted the high leaders of Boko Haram or those who perpetuated actually crimes against people. Most of these individuals, in fact, appear to be civilians caught in crossfire, charged with minor offenses such as having sold a motorbike to a Boko Haram member or having concealed information from authorities. So this delusion has to stop. whether it be in the Northeast, Zaria, or with respect to the killing of protesters in the streets of Lagos, the authorities in Nigeria have proved bent on denying crimes than showing any willingness to investigate and prosecute these crimes. We note the prosecutor has stated she looks forward to further constructive dialogue and exchange with authorities. Indeed, it's the right thing to do so, to demand action and cooperation from Nigerian authorities, and we wish her all the luck on this regard. But at the same time, we urge her and the office to be cautious and not continue to be overly deferential to Nigerian authorities in this approach. A similar lack of domestic inactivity and lack of cooperation seen in the last 10 years of pre-examination should no longer be allowed as the ICC moves through the investigations phase. And the third and equally important reason is that further delay will sabotage successful prosecution of crimes in the future. Every day of delay affects the chance of successful prosecution. And this is not an abstract notion when it comes to Nigeria. We've seen it from Zaria to Lagos, Maiduguri to Bama. There have been several instances where evidence destruction and intimidation of witnesses has happened. Blood has been washed from scenes of crimes, bodies collected and disappeared, and mass graves tampered with. Many courageous activists, witnesses, and victims, some of whom were with us today, are facing backlash from imprisonment to intimidation and harassment. And many like Kelu are dying and have died before they have seen the chance to tell their stories. Hence, a formal opening of investigations in Nigeria will come a long way in preserving much needed evidence. A full investigation will allow the office to benefit from the full provisions of the statute that will oblige states to cooperate fully. And there are many things that can be done now. Where necessary, the prosecutor should consider provisions in the statute that allow her to take advantage of unique investigative opportunities, including to undertake mass grave exhumations, taking testimonies from witnesses, and etc. And as you've seen today's event, there is also a huge interest on ICC's next steps in Nigeria, and an outreach to victims and affected communities needs to start in earnest now without any delay. So this is our call. We do hear the prosecutor's explanation that she is facing immense resource challenge, and this is undeniable. And we've called time and again every year on state parties who are failing to meet their obligations to ensure that they provide the court with adequate resources. But we will not accept a situation where the Office of the Prosecutor or the Assembly of State Parties says that justice for victims in Nigeria is too expensive or cannot be done due to resource constraints. Every day that passes is too many. Throughout history, it's been the inaction of those who could have acted, the indifference of those who should have known better, and the silence of the voice of justice when it mattered most that had made it possible for evil to triumph. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Netanet, and thank you for your call. Hopefully it will be heard. Hamsatu, please, you have the floor now.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I always keep saying, honestly, I really appreciate this opportunity. And I always keep saying in every occasion I find the opportunity to speak, that the northeastern Nigeria is the most underdeveloped part of the country, where we score the lowest in all human indicators. Therefore, in fact, being in power or authority or position gives whoever has that privilege the absolute power, and then he becomes the alpha and omega over lives and deaths, over whatever he wants. And then to the common man in northeastern Nigeria, who is from the age of 30 and below, human right, the knowledge of human right is virtually not there. People don't even know that they have a right, not to talk of pursuing their rights or asking for it or even defending it. That's how we live. Hence, in fact, whoever assumes power, he does as he wishes, he loses our common resources as he wishes, becomes very powerful, So that even if workers' salaries are paid, you will find people are praising that person as if he gave it out from his own pocket. Education is not accessible to the child of the common man except if your parents can afford. And even our pension and gratuities as civil servants were denied. In fact, for the first 18 years or 20 years or 18, I can't remember anybody getting any pension or gratuity after retirement, but all our political officers have appropriated it. It's only last week that the current governor has to go to take loan to pay the backlashes of pensions and gratuity of civil servants for the first 18 years. This is how we are living. And then with the insurgency, this is what the radicalized extremist groups came and found. This is the norm. So therefore, as far back as 2011, when they came in, now their guns have given them the power. So they go and started engage in indiscriminate abduction of women and young girls from their homes at night at gunpoint and then taking them away as sex slaves. And nobody talks. And then they go with their guns, toting their guns along the street, killing whoever they want to kill. Yes, they have absolute power over life and death. And then when the counterinsurgency operatives came, the scenario didn't change. Rather, it is even worse. For the counterterrorism operatives, particularly the Nigerian military who have become Alpha and Omega, I can remember a soldier telling me, you are now under a state of emergency. You have lost all your human rights. Hence, they can go to the market, close the gates of the markets, select who they want to keep there, and then start shooting them indiscriminately, massacre them and pack them, and then go and then bury them in mass graves. In our homes, along the streets, young men within Maiduguri and environments have been indiscriminately arrested. In fact, now we are rehabilitating the mothers of such victims of disappearances. We have almost 8,000 of such mothers that we registered within Maiduguri alone who are looking for their children who were arrested by Nigerian military. And then we have another list of over 6,000 IDP women whose husbands were taken away from them by the Nigerian military and then taken away. Now it is getting to almost 5 years. There is no news, no accountability for their husbands. We have not even talked about young children, boys and girls, who are detained with their parents within the military detention facilities. Many of these children may have been abducted or even secluded when Boko Haram takes their territory. Yes, and the grown-up girls among them have even alleged sexual violations. And then when the women of these young women, men who are also abducted, some of them sexually abused by Boko Haram, whenever they are rescued too, even before they were brought to the military detention facilities, along the way in the bushes, they suffered these sexual violations throughout, and then they will be kept in that facility for more than a year. Some can tell you up to 2 years, and then being sexually violated day and night by even the state actors. Because many of the women in my network will now tell you Nigerian military is worse than Boko Haram. So therefore, this is now the scenario. Now it is getting into almost 11 years, with about 9 years, people in fact clamoring for accountability, asking for the whereabouts of their loved ones who have been detained and disappeared and who have been abducted, radicalized, and turned into fighters by Boko Haram. But there is nowhere ever, in fact, except when Buhari came to power during his first tenure, that he instituted a single judicial committee of inquiry, where, in fact, they just artificially heard some of the cases. They could not, in fact, listen to the cases of these women until after a lot of allegations assisted by international partners that we were called to go to Abuja to go and testify. And when we testified, to date, the findings of that investigation is nowhere. And then even to the international community, the efforts of international community has no effect in Nigeria because of impunity. Yes, Her Excellency Agnes Kalamadu was in Maiduguri. In fact, this woman stayed for 1.5 days collecting testimonies from, in fact, eyewitnesses and relatives and then victims about the atrocities committed on them by the Nigerian security officials and then some by Boko Haram. She documented her result and then, in fact, wrote a beautiful report in Nigeria. What happened when the report came out? Days after the report had been released, the presidential spokesman, Garba Shehu, came out and commented on the report, but he was completely silent on that aspect of the Northeast Nigeria, as if the Northeast is not part of the country. That report was swept under the carpet. So what hope and future does the common man in Northeastern Nigeria has? So therefore, when recently we heard the ICC is going to open an investigation, honestly, we are excited, we are thrilled, because the level of impunity in that part of the voiceless society is beyond what one can imagine. It is rather better imagined than seen. So we all, and then when this, even our youth volunteers who we clamored for to come and then intervene to the rescue of the ordinary civilians, this youth sacrificed their lives as civilian JTF vigilantes, took up local arms and went after the armed Boko Haram. Many of them have been killed. Many of them are living with permanent disabilities. And now when they succeeded in bringing about the leadership camp, this young man, greater percentage of these young men have taken to the footpaths of the soldiers and started committing atrocities against the very people that they sought to defend and then rescue from the atrocities of Boko Haram and the Nigerian soldiers. So impunity surrounds us all over. Impunity has become a norm. Impunity has become part of life in that part of the country, as if there are no authorities, as if there are no government, and then fear of God does not even arise in the context in which we live. So therefore, now the ICC coming up to impact with a resolution that they want to open investigation, we believe they are a God-sent, this is a God-sent intervention, where in fact, for the first time, the voice of the common man has been heard and then action is initiated. We just pray that this will be practicalized and then investigation carried out. I'm not even surprised the way Nigerians, in fact, whoever is in power or whoever is in authority in Nigeria keeps looting public resources and then amass wealth. Because perhaps that is what gives them the impunity. They feel having all the money, having all the influences and power gives you absolute power over the lives and death of God's creations. And then nobody questions them, nobody asks them, and then several times, countlessly, the names of individuals among the military, among the politicians, have been named by the extremist groups themselves who are in for peace, and then by people generally, and then by affected people, about how they have aided, how they have sponsored, how they have supported the committing of these atrocities and then the violence taking place in the northeastern Nigeria. But to date, all those whom we heard have been accused either as religious accomplices or political or security actors are still going, in fact, scotch-free with impunity, as if they have done nothing. Therefore, giving the common man a sense of to believe that really, if you are in power, God has given you all the right to do what you want with people's life without anybody questioning you. So therefore, ICC coming with this investigation with the support and then of human rights organizations like the Amnesty International and others, we really appreciated them. They have helped us to create a network of victims and relations of disappearances and of people who are affected including young children, boys and girls who have suffered all forms of violations from both sides of the insurgency, both the counterterrorism and the extremist group. I think now we have a sigh of relief. We only pray, in fact, we cannot wait to start seeing this investigation flagged up, and then these accusation and others now being fully investigated, so that at least, if nothing else, people will know that there is a day of reckoning, even in this world, before we die and go to the next world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Amsatu, for this very powerful testimony. The situation you described is just horrific, and it's mainly, as you explained, fueled by impunity. So there is very high expectation that this cycle of violence and lack of accountability is stopped. I will hand over now to Agnes Kalama, the UN Special Rapporteur, who can share her experience and information about the investigation made on this specific issue.
Thank you very much for the invitation and the great honor to be sharing the floor with you. Just to react to some of Amsatu's comments, indeed, I could not agree with her more. My report, or my preliminary report, has indeed been largely swept away, and I have rarely been to a country or engaged with a government that was so reluctant to respond back. It is not as if the Nigerian authorities have been particularly aggressive towards me. In fact, compared to others, they have been pretty decent. But there is simply no interaction, no meaningful dialogue over my findings. I have sent a number of communications to the authorities with specific questions during my mission a year ago and afterwards, and there has been no response thus far. So it is quite remarkable, the capacity of the authorities, it seems, to largely ignore, turn away, and move on, basically. That's at least the impression I have had based on my mission there and the aftermath of my mission. The more analytical finding that I would like to share with you is my extreme concern for what I have found. And therefore, I was glad that the ICC took the decision that it took, even if it took them 2 years to take it. I've described what I've found as amounting to an injustice pressure cooker, with situations simmering almost in every region, or in every region that I have traveled to. We've already heard about the situation in the Northeast, so I may not go back to that too much. And Amsatu, it's not because I want to neglect it, but it's because we have so little time. But there's absolutely no doubt that the armed conflict is in the Northeast, is a major pressure cooker. It's a national and a regional pressure cooker, if not an international one. 1 year after my visit, I have continued to monitor the situation, and while I thought there were some positive steps taken towards the beginning of 2019, the situation since then has clearly deteriorated, and the security strategy that has been adopted for a year or so, which was very much criticized when I was in Nigeria, that strategy is proving to be extremely negative in its impact on the population. And we've had very bloody examples of how such a strategy is not conducive to the security of the populations. But there are, of course, other conflicts in Nigeria, and while they may not amount to an armed conflict in the traditional sense of the word, although that's certainly something we can debate, they are low-intensity conflict with a tremendous amount of violence and indeed killings. There is the conflict in the Middle Belt opposing the Fulani herders and the farming communities. There is the repression of the indigenous people of Biafra, the repression of the Islamic movement of Nigeria, the so-called cultism in the oil-producing southern state, the situation in and around Lagos in the river state and elsewhere, all of which are producing their own dynamics, largely historically rooted, and huge human rights violations. And on top of those localized form of violence, we have national patterns, countrywide patterns, which includes the widespread insecurity, including because of violence and lethal force used by the police and the militaries. There is very few, if any, effective investigation carried out in the violations committed by the security forces. There is no or very few meaningful prosecution taking place, and overall a militarization of policing, which has not been conducive at all to security. In fact, it has seen an increase in insecurity. What I have found as well when I was there, which alarmed me, but there too it is historically rooted, is a high level of resentment and grievances. Most of it, or a lot of it, is being expressed through what I have described as toxic ethno-religious narrative, and indeed what would be described in the current language of counterterrorism as so-called extremist ideologies, which are not just what we may find, in fact, in the Northeast. So there is a general and a generalized breakdown of the rule of law, and that has extreme and acute consequences for the most vulnerable and impoverished population of Nigeria, as it has been documented thus far. Some have argued when I was there during my mission that, yes, that may well be true, but Nigeria can manage that. It has managed very difficult moment in its tumultuous history. It has even managed to go beyond the military rule and a very, very bloody conflict earlier on in its independence. What I would like to insist upon at the moment, and as a way, I think, of further contextualizing what we are talking about, is the fact that there are three broader contextualized factors which are extremely worrisome, in my opinion. The first one is the nationwide population explosion. That is a very specific characteristic of Nigeria, and one against which the government has done very little, seemingly, to tackle. But that in itself should be a source of worry, because it is also taking place alongside a second issue, which is the increased rate of extreme poverty. Nigeria is holding the dubious, extremely negative record of being one of the few, if not only, countries in the world whose rate of extreme poverty has increased, even though the country itself has gone into the so-called middle income country. But for the vast majority of the population in Nigeria, their economic situation has worsened, so much so that almost 50% of the 200 million Nigerians are considered to be living in extreme poverty. The third contextual information which we should all keep in mind when we think of Nigeria is the spreading environmental degradation and desertification. It is evident throughout West Africa, and it is certainly evident in Nigeria. Throughout my mission, I was made aware of that degradation and of its impact on people's livelihood, on people's resources, and on people's culture, on people's way of life. And I can assure you that there is no doubt in my mind that the failure to respond to that environmental degradation is no doubt feeding many of the conflicts we are talking about right now. And finally, the fourth issue I want to raise for the context is the proliferation of small and military-grade weapons that are made available, that are feeding, that are increasing the lack of security and insecurity and the lethality of the conflict that are taking place throughout Nigeria. The proliferation itself is linked to what's happening regionally, but it is having a dramatic impact on the conflict we are talking about. So in that context, I think, in my opinion, addressing the regime of impunity, the breakdown of the rule of law, does demand on our part to contextualize what's happening. And it is very clear, based on history and on other situations, that tackling human rights violations in Nigeria does also demand addressing the climate crisis. It demands addressing the population crisis and the incredible economic inequality in the country. The last point I want to make very quickly is a thought and an exchange I have with some people who are far more knowledgeable about Nigeria, because sometimes I do wonder, where do we look at? As Netsanet has pointed out, as Amsatu has pointed out, there is either no investigation and no prosecution, or there is a plethora of administrative and judicial inquiry which are just whitewashing the situation. They are just a facade, they are a parody, they are meant to do a lot of things, but certainly not to move us closer to accountability. So where do we look for hope inside the country? And I'm going to say we look for hope with the people. And I think what happened a few weeks ago with the large demonstrations, which were neither ethnic-based, neither religious-based, but which meant to be about Nigeria, and which demanded an end to police violence, demanded an end to the infamous SARS. To me, those moments and those movements should give us hope that the young population of Nigeria, the new generation of Nigeria, the more educated generation of Nigeria will be the one who are going to say to the old generations, enough is enough. We are going to take care of our country. We are going to go and address those endemic questions and those violations. So I think we need to place our strategy for the future squarely with this very vibrant civil society and youth population of Nigeria, who wants far better for their country than their elders have managed to achieve. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Agnes. Thank you for these words that give hope and also for adding elements of context that make it even more urgent to address human rights violations and impunity. Rod Rastan from the Office of the ICC Prosecutor is here with us. You have heard all the panelists. There is a lot of expectation and also around this decision. So you have the floor.
Thank you. So I'm very honored and pleased to be on this panel with such distinguished colleagues. And indeed, the Office of the Prosecutor of the ICC has been examining what's been going on in Nigeria for a long time. We call this phase, before we open investigations, preliminary examination. It doesn't mean anything to, I think, most people, but it just means that it's a stage where we're determining whether we should open investigations. And it didn't take us long to conclude that crimes were committed within the court's jurisdiction. So the court deals with war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. And the crime of aggression more recently has been adopted. So already in 2013, we concluded that crimes have been committed. At that time, our conclusion was focused on alleged crimes by Boko Haram, but in subsequent years, we updated it, and we also included our findings with respect to the Nigerian security forces. And what we basically did, as Natsanet mentioned, is that the court as a whole, as a principle, and particularly the Office of the Prosecutor, is always trying to hold states to their own duty to investigate and prosecute. And our system is set up, as you know, as a complementary mechanism. We're supposed to step in if the national response isn't effective or isn't genuine. So the position we took, as we do with with all states, with Colombia, with Kenya, with Afghanistan, or across the board, we try to promote national proceedings. And of course, we engage in a dialogue with the Nigerian authorities. I know we've been criticized for doing that for too long, or that some people feel that dialogue was not a good idea. But certainly on our side, we have always sought to try to create incentives or to offer if you like, the threat of the ICC intervening in order to create a momentum domestically to have national responses. So we call this dual aspects of working in partnership with states, but also being vigilant. If they don't act, then we should act. And I think certainly our conclusion after this long period is that although we've engaged in many missions and we have worked with the prosecuting offices and we've seen some progress, and of course the Special Rapporteur Agnes Callamard also mentioned some of the progress she's seen as well in her reports. We've seen some progress, and certainly we continue to encourage that. And I think the fact that we have concluded shouldn't be a sign of discouragement for those people within the justice system that are seeking to bring accountability, and we continue to encourage that. But at the same time, we also concluded that in terms of what we would look at in terms of alleged war crimes or crimes against humanity, the national proceedings as they exist didn't seem to be an obstacle or to correspond to what we were likely to want to investigate. So the prosecutor has, as I say, given a lot of time and effort to help to encourage the national response, but ultimately we concluded already last year, we said we were likely to conclude our assessment this year, and this year now at the end of it, we have indeed confirmed that as things stand, there is a basis for the court to proceed because the national response doesn't correspond to what we're looking at. Now, at the same time, of course, as Natsana mentioned, we will continue to encourage the authorities to do proceedings. If our announcement acts as some kind of a spur, an incentive to galvanize a national response for accountability, then of course we welcome that and we continue to support that. At the same time, if not, then we stand ready indeed to carry out our own investigations. So in the coming period, basically we are continuing our forward planning for investigations. We do have the limitation that Natsana mentioned, that the ICC is a court. It sounds like a very ominous title to be called the International Criminal Court, but we are a court with limited capacity. So we are currently investigating multiple situations around the world in everything from what's happening in the Central African Republic to the DRC to Afghanistan to Bangladesh, Myanmar. We just also announced that we are intending to open investigations in Ukraine. And so in Georgia, we have investigations open in Libya. So there are many situations that we're dealing with, and we have also a very small number of staff. We only have 80 investigators. You might laugh at that. We have 80 investigators. This is smaller than the number of officers working on counterterrorism at the city level in some countries. The London Metropolitan Police has 1,600 investigators, for example, if I got that statistic right. So, and actually we have a smaller budget than some of the organizations that are here with us today as the Office of the Prosecutor. But I won't belabor the point. But the point is that it's not that we're looking as an excuse not to do things, but just that we also are emphasizing that we also need support from state parties and from other stakeholders to also help the court have the means to deliver what it wants to do. What this means for Nigeria is that in the coming period, the prosecutor indeed will have to make some decisions on how to roll out investigations. The current prosecutor, Prosecutor Bensouda from the Gambia, as you know, is ending her mandate in 6 months. There's a new prosecutor coming in. So she still has, of course, the mandate to make decisions on opening new investigations. But also it makes sense that she consults with the new incoming prosecutor on this. And also she's called for state parties to give her the means to do it. If the means do not come, then the prosecutor may have to, for example, decide to terminate some lines of inquiry in existing situations or to complete some of the activities that are ongoing in order to allow the capacity of the office to open investigations in relation to Nigeria and also in Ukraine, as we mentioned also at the same time last week. So these are just very pragmatic considerations. It doesn't mean that the office will not proceed with investigations. It just means that we are having to discuss how we roll out this capacity. And of course, in relation to Nigeria, as you've seen in our reports, hopefully, we believe that crimes are being committed across multiple fronts. Almost every crime within the jurisdiction of the court appears to have been committed in one form or other in relation to war crimes and crimes against humanity under our statute. We recognize that the vast majority of the crimes alleged to have been committed that we have found and made findings for are attributed to Boko Haram and its splinter groups. But also we do recognize and do make findings in relation to the responses by the Nigerian security forces, and you also do find that they have also committed crimes, war crimes and crimes against humanity. So we make that reasonable basis determination. But also, as we emphasize in our report, our findings are not limited only to the armed conflict, the non-international armed conflict between Boko Haram and the Nigerian security forces. Of course, we have received lots of information and allegations relating to other events, other incidents, other types of conduct. And just to explain that if an investigation is opened, the prosecutor is not limited only to the things that she has looked at this initial stage. Once an investigation is opened, the investigation it's subject to certain parameters. So in our case, for example, we would say we intend to investigate all alleged ICC conduct occurring since, for example, 2009, when the non-international armed conflict began. But it wouldn't be limited to only Boko Haram and the Nigerian security forces in terms of that armed conflict. It would look at any other allegation that fell within the scope of the court's jurisdiction. Of course, for the court to investigate and prosecute, we must be satisfied that these are war crimes and crimes against humanity. We're aware of a lot of obviously violent episodes have happened in Nigeria, but not all crimes correspond to the Rome Statute. So we would have to be obviously focusing on those which appear to be occurring in the context of an armed conflict for war crimes, to be in the context of an associated with an armed conflict or otherwise a crime against humanity. And so finally, just to say, moving forwards, as I say, we will continue to work in a collaborative spirit with the authorities. We want to be able to encourage them and stimulate them and to maybe be the stimulus that will try to galvanize calls for accountability that you have made and others have made. Maybe our presence at the ICC with an open investigation will stimulate national activities to a different level. But if it doesn't, we also we proceed with our investigations. We build our cases, and we see what impact we can have in terms of contributing towards accountability. And I very much take the point, as mentioned before. I think for the court as a whole, there will be a need to engage in outreach in the coming period to explain to different stakeholders what is the role of the court, how does it proceed, what are the next steps. And certainly in the interim, absolutely, I mean, we are taking steps during this whole period, even before, to identify evidence preservation opportunities, unique investigative opportunities, operational planning, looking at issues related to cooperation, looking at the security situation. So all of that planning is certainly already well on, in process across all prelim examinations, and that's something that we will be doing as we move forward. I hope that's useful just as a quick overview. Of course, that was very brief, but as I say, very happy to be here and part of this panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rod, for these clarifications, and I think we've all heard as well your call for support. As we have seen, this culture of impunity goes beyond the Northeast conflict. This is not specific to this area or this situation, and this is the moment to let the opportunity to DJ Switch to talk about this huge and tremendous movement around NSAS movement against impunity for police violence. Catherine, it's over to you.
All right, thank you for having me. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. You see, we have a popular saying in Nigeria, wahala no dey finish, meaning the problems never end. You see, I grew up in a family of 8 where my parents really had their hand full. They worked to give us the best they could afford: education, Medicare, food, allowances, most importantly, a home. My parents taught us how to respect each other's differences, understand each other, stand for each other, and protect each other. I must say, my brother did take a lot of the blame for my many mischiefs. But unfortunately, in the late 90s to 2000, things took a turn for the worse when the Ishekiris and the Ijors in Warri, where we lived back then, went into war with each other because of a failure in leadership and respect for differences. Many were displaced from their homes and killed. My parents lost a lot, and I had to grow up real quick. This was my first real encounter with insecurity, a lack of accountability, and irresponsibility. Nigeria is home to over 200 million brothers and sisters that are beautifully diverse in tribe and faith. But we lack education, a functional health system, electricity, we lack jobs, security. The basic things that any parent, guardian, and in this case, a leader should provide so that we can achieve our ambitions. Instead, these basic things have been weaponized by our leaders and used against us, used to lure us to do their bidding, used to oppress us, keep us too hungry to be angry, used to kill us. So, dear Agnes, it was indeed hopeful to see the new generation of Nigerians stand up for Nigeria, not religious or tribe-based. But if we don't act, this new generation will be haunted like myself, wiped out or succumb to the will of a dying generation. But even a magician cannot perform one trick forever, because we, the Nigerian people, were tired. And for the first time, I saw Nigerians stand for each other in protest all over the country. End SARS. Now, SARS is the Special Anti-Robbery Squad Unit, which the government rebranded to SWAT, after disbanding the said SARS over 3 times and twice in 1 year. SARS have a track record of more daylight robbery than actual robbers. They've murdered more innocent citizens than murderers in the society, more rape than the public is even aware of, constantly exhibiting their lack of intelligence and training by harassing Nigerians, either because of how we look, the hair we have, the cars we drive, or if we have tattoos on our bodies. When you speak up and ask what you may have done wrong, they beat you up, lock you up, or kill you altogether. Now, this gave birth to a movement, End SARS, a movement against police brutality, which has since become a much bigger movement against bad governance. And the reason is simple. From the President, General Muhammadu Buhari, downwards, they are all SARS. You see, because this is a government, yes, that would rather silence and kill its citizens rather than be guided by their concerns and their cries. Hide COVID-19 palliatives, mind you, that were donated rather than feed its people. One that would rather spend quality time with his cows rather than address its citizens. The same government that chose to inject rogue elements into peaceful protests rather than protect its people, but choose to coddle terrorists. It is the same government that froze the accounts of protesters and seized passports, but cannot seem to trace the accounts that sponsor terrorism. It states in the Constitution that the security and welfare of the Nigerian people is the primary purpose of the government. But on the 20th of October, 2020, the Nigerian army, sanctioned by the government, stormed the Lekki toll gate in what I call a first wave of assault. No warning, no dialogue, just guns blazing, shooting into a crowd of the bravest set of people I have ever met. Braver than the men and women trained to be brave, braver than the government officials who sent them there. They shot at us with live ammunition. We braced ourselves, we screamed, we sang, we cried, all while waving our Nigerian flags. You see, as I witnessed people die, I truly believed we would all die. And so I started to live broadcast the insanity on Instagram, and I am not the only one. In a matter of minutes, dreams and futures were lost. Nigerians killed unprovoked. But the commander of the 65 Battalion, Salisu Bello, claimed to have given us water and drinks that night. But that is not even on the same continent with the truth. I have a clip recorded from the live broadcast where you can hear me asking Bello why they were shooting at us with live ammunition. His response was that my coming close to him poses a threat to him and he will act accordingly. Is this the act of someone who gave us water and drinks? I also have another clip from the same night where you can hear a lady's voice asking the whereabouts of the people that had been shot. Further proof that the bodies we saw were taken away by the army present. The army claimed to have cared for us. But when the Nigerians that were on that live, when they called ambulances to assist us at the toll gate, they were stopped and asked to turn back by the army. We were forced to have a crash course on medical procedures, attempting to extract a bullet from the leg of a protester until one ambulance came from the back. So please tell me, what then was their intention if not to kill us? At this point, we had counted 15 bodies. A few hours later came the second wave of assault by the Nigerian police with the same modus operandi, killing, injuring those of us left at the toll gate. The same police also shot at us the next morning. Now listen, this is just one incident. There is Obibo, there's Mpo, there's Zabamari, many more. The Nigerian authorities, under the poor, corrupt and misguided leadership of President Buhari, down to his cohorts, Governor Jide Sanwo-Olu, General Takar Buratai, Brigadier Taiwo, F.O. Omata, Lai Mohammed, and many more. They have all tried severally to deny these events, while in the same breath contradicting themselves. This government continues to fail in doing its duty as what I would have called an elected government if that was not riddled with corruption itself? And so today, I urge you, as members of part of the global governing body and other members not here present today, to take necessary and swift actions in ensuring justice is served to the Nigerian people. Through your investigations, I believe you will find ample evidence to bring charges against the elements in the Nigerian government. Please, please do not continue to place us at the back burner or say we are not a priority. Do not turn a blind eye to a nation with immense potential to be on the world stage if only these potentials are harnessed and not killed off. As Nigeria is a member of the United Nations, which says membership is open to all peace-loving states, it is evident in that statement alone the state of Nigeria has failed. Our leaders too greedy, too corrupt, and quite frankly, unequipped intellectually, mentally, physically, to protect Nigerians or move the nation anywhere. If it is indeed true that the First Lady of Nigeria, P.BUHARI, can relocate to Dubai, citing insecurity in the presidential villa, Aso Rock, the most secure building in Nigeria, then I ask, where do we, the average Nigerian, go? Mr. Rod, you say your office has about 80 investigators. It was funny when you said it, but I can assure you, millions of Nigerians are willing to help provide all you may need to reduce the potential burden on this request. We only have our voices. That is all we have. As a people, we are using it to sorosoke. So please listen. As Agnes said, the country is a keg. It's sitting on a keg of gunpowder because of all the things that we have been deprived of. I am advocating for all types of peace, but justice. And through justice is the only way peace can truly thrive. It is now your duty to help us show that democracy, accountability does not only belong to a certain group of countries, but to all. As I said earlier, wahala no dey finish. But that does not mean problems are not solved. The time for action is indeed now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for using this your fame to raise awareness and to fight for this for justice for all. Thank you so much for this. Unfortunately, I think we have now come to the end of the session. I didn't see any specific questions, so I guess I've seen a lot of comments that all of you have probably seen. And so I think we need to conclude now. I would like to thank again